Every Tuesday, we are very happy to bring you Peter King to talk about what just happened. And Peter, never a dull moment around here. That is for sure. Things didn't play out nearly the way a lot of Niners fans were expecting it to play out in Denver. And, just the way that Jimmy stepped out of the back of the end zone, did himself no favors. It was a tremendous defensive performance against a struggling Denver Bronco team. But, man, that offense certainly let things down. And even though the 49ers have one of the best defenses in football, they're 1-2 sitting through 3 weeks when they probably should be 3-0. So we're not quite at DEFCON 1 here, but we're ticking down. It's DEFCON 3. How are you?
Yeah, I guess the way I look at that game, that was Bill Parcells once said, I forget, I covered the Giants in the mid-'80s, and Parcells had a bunch of cliches, but the one thing I remember that he said most weeks, he was the kind of guy, it would get to be Friday, and you'd be sitting around the press room. Parcells would have a cup of coffee and a cigarette, and by the way, with Cremora, not with half and half, by the way.
Good to know.
And he'd just be sitting there, his feet would be up, and we'd say, hey, what do you think about Dallas-Philly this week? And he goes, desperate team always wins. And I looked at that game the other night. The one thing I thought, and I did talk to Nathaniel Hackett after the game, the one thing I thought was, when Russell Wilson got the ball down 10-5, midway/late in the fourth quarter, and he had to put a long drive together, he said, okay, listen, I am done being a facilitator. I'm done being John Stockton. I'm taking the effing ball, and I am going to make this happen myself. And look, as much as we can all sit here and say that great defensive effort and all that, sometimes the best way to play a football game is for the best player on your team to essentially say, give me the ball, I'm going to try to win this game myself. That's what Russell Wilson tried to do, and honestly, that's really kind of what he did on that last 80-yard drive that they had. And honestly, I'm not sure there's a lot to take from that other than I agree with you. I'd be a little concerned right now about the San Francisco offense, because even though the Denver defense is a very good crew, San Francisco should have been able to do more than what they did. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And obviously, Denver needed the game. They both needed the game, but Denver really needed this game.
So my follow-up to you then there, did that offense fail in your eyes, Peter, because of execution or design in the first place?
Now, that's a really good question. My feeling is when I look at what happened in that game, is that one of the things that Nathaniel Hackett told me after the game is, I said, man, you really struggled on offense. Is this last drive that you had a vision of what you think this offense can be? And he goes, hey, listen, just think about what Russell Wilson has gone through. New team, all new players, didn't have anybody he knew, brand new coaches, blah, 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 and all that. And let's look at the Niners, okay? The Niners, to me, one of the things that has been difficult is that Jimmy Garoppolo, like when I was in training camp, I had heard that, he didn't have a playbook, he didn't have a tablet, he didn't have a relationship other than, hey, hello, how are you, with Brian Griese, who's going to be his quarterback coach, who ended up, on Labor Day, ended up being his quarterback coach. And so there was some weirdness with him. And so really what we're talking about is, this is, in essence, his first start after an extremely difficult off season. And that's why I don't think this one game you should look at and say, oh my God, the 49ers are really screwed. Because I just think part of this is adapting to a new coach in part, adapting to some new players, and adapting to a team that thought he was gone forever. And so, again, I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying I don't think that this one game should be the be-all, end-all that you think of when you think of, oh, boy, we're screwed with Garoppolo now.
Is the thing you described, though, the one true act of hubris that Kyle Shanahan can be blamed for? The assumption that a guy who is still on your roster is not going to be on your roster. That rather than just say, well, you're here until you're not here, I'm giving you a playbook, I'm giving you a tablet, you're going to be in the meetings because you're still here. Is that the mistake that he made? Or is it reasonable for somebody to assume that I'm pretty sure we can trade you, so we're going to act like you're already traded?
I don't, Ray, the answer is I don't know the answer to that question. But my feeling when you raise that point is a very simple feeling. And that is that when I think it was around, what was it, like January 31 or February 1, whatever, a day or two after the NFC Championship game, when Jimmy Garoppolo sat there and basically said goodbye to, the 49er fans. He said goodbye to all these guys who'd covered him since he got there. He basically said goodbye to the Bay Area. Okay? And the 49ers vowed to him, look, we're going to make a good deal for you. Don't worry. We're going to do you a solid. We understand this hasn't worked out exactly the way you wanted, blah, blah, blah. Well, and again, I don't know what actually exactly was said between John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and either the agent or the player, but I only can assume that they absolutely were convinced that they were trading Jimmy Garoppolo. And so, hey, listen, thanks for everything. Thanks for all your service, blah, blah, blah. Let's move on. And then, as the off season went on, they found that, oh my God, this guy's got a shoulder problem that he thinks is going to need to be repaired. So after the shoulder problem is repaired, all of a sudden, I'll tell you something that I'm not very proud of, but it was done early in this off season, where a general manager in the NFL was saying, you're really, because this is a guy I talk to a lot. He said, you are really overrating what the 49ers are going to get for Garoppolo. I said, you're wrong. I said, the Niners, I think, are going to get, at the very least, a mid-2 for Garoppolo. Because I said, I get it. He's not Justin Herbert. He's not Burrow. I understand what he is. But what he is a winning player who people love to play with, guys on the team. And so I said, I think there's a lot of value in that. Anyway, bottom line is, recently we had a bet, and the bet was, I'll bet you a bottle of wine. So recently I paid off my bet, and I just said, man, when I paid off the bet, I said, man, I should give you a case of wine, not a bottle, because you killed me on this bet. but anyway, the overriding point I was going to make is just nobody could see what happened, or what was about to happen. And again, I guess it's a great example of how we should all maybe keep our powder dry a lot of times when we're trying to predict the future of what happens in the NFL.
Peter King here on 95.7 The Game. And, I'm not obviously asking you to reveal your sources inside the organization, but I want to ask a hypothetical question. Let's say there really was just, a dissolving relationship between Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan. Jimmy's got reasons to be upset, and I think Kyle's maybe got some reasons to be upset too. But, Kyle actively sought to replace a guy who he's had an awful lot of success with. If that relationship erodes, will it get to you? Will you know that? Or do you think the 49ers are really good at covering these internal strifes up now because of the lessons of the Harbaugh era?
I doubt they would have continued on with Jimmy Garoppolo a month ago if they found that either Jimmy was so ticked off that the thought of walking in the building and playing for Kyle Shanahan again was detestable. Okay? And I doubt that Kyle Shanahan, and look, Kyle Shanahan may have individual feelings about Garoppolo, which I'm certainly not aware of, but he may have individual feelings about Garoppolo that are not altogether positive. However, he also understands that Jimmy Garoppolo was on his team for one of the sweetest wins that Kyle Shanahan has ever had in his football life. As a high school football star in Denver, as an itinerant football lifer to be both at Texas and at Duke, and then as he started to roam all over the country trying to get this job that he has right now as a coach. So I can tell you, because a half hour after, 40 minutes after the game in Green Bay, I was sitting in Kyle Shanahan's office in Green Bay after the game, and he and John Lynch were both having a what's the Mexican beer that begins with M?
Modelo.
Modelo. They were both having a Modelo.
By the way, Ray and I are all over that. I don't know what we know about sports, but man, we got to that one quick.
Yeah, sorry about that. If you had said an Italian beer beginning with P, I would have known it, Peroni. But I didn't know the Modelo. But they were sitting there, and I have to tell you that Kyle Shanahan was as happy a person as I've seen in a long time. And it's because he knew what just happened. They went to Green Bay and stole playoff game from Aaron Rodgers and from Matt LaFleur, who, by the way, Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan are pretty tight, or at least at one point were very tight. And the only reason I'm mentioning this is that Kyle Shanahan knows that he can think whatever he wants to think, or the public can think whatever they want to think about Garoppolo. But quite honestly, Jimmy Garoppolo has been at the forefront of some gigantic wins in Kyle Shanahan's life. And this was certainly one of them, regardless of how incredible he might have played. So, and the only reason I mention that is that Kyle Shanahan had to be thinking in the spring, let's not burn every bridge here. Let's just keep our options open, because you never know. And quite honestly, I think that the allowances they made to Jimmy Garoppolo in the summer were saying, hey, listen, fella, we really appreciate everything you've done for us. We truly do. We're not just saying that. So, listen, if you want to be in the quarterback room, if you want to be doing all of these things, we'll do it. Okay, but if you just want to come out and do, practice on your own and do all that stuff, that's absolutely fine. And again, I have to tell you, I don't know what happened, but the only thing I'm saying is it is eminently understandable why Kyle Shanahan wouldn't want to have burned a bridge, because Jimmy Garoppolo, whatever you say about him, has been worth far more than a mid-second rounder to this franchise.
So you mentioned earlier that the Parcells quote about, desperate teams win. How desperate would you imagine the 49ers are going into this weekend?
They got to be desperate. Because if you look at this game, if you look at this matchup, I think it's absolutely, totally fascinating. Think about it. Think about, your second straight primetime national TV game, which I'm sure they're not saying, hey, great, we're on national TV this week. But think about being on Monday Night Football in a survival of the fittest game, knowing that if you go 1-3 on your East Coast trip, there is no margin for error in Atlanta or Carolina. None. Zero. You've got to win both of those games, or else you're looking at maybe, hopefully, we might, who knows, if the cards all fall right, maybe we can battle our way into the playoffs. This is an important game for the 49ers. A lot more important than it is for the Rams. And that's why I say the desperate team always wins. Not always, but the desperate team has a better chance to win. And I guess the way I would look at this game is that, especially the 49ers know exactly sort of the egg they laid in Denver. And they know that they've had a good track record in some very, very fight-to-the-finish games against the Rams. And so there's no doubt in their mind. They know they're putting most of the players on the field Monday night at home. They know that they're putting most of the players on the field who have had great success, sometimes against the Rams. And, midway through the fourth quarter in the NFC Championship game, that was anybody's game to win, obviously. We all saw it. So, to me, I like the 49ers' chances Monday night.
Any element at all, Peter, to the feeling that maybe they let a very important voice out of the building? Mike McDaniel has landed in Miami and has created quite a splash and seems to be a bit of a quarterback whisperer. And I'm wondering if keeping that guy in Santa Clara doesn't have a very different feel about this offense right now, no matter who the quarterback is. We're dazzled by McDaniel, just the way he goes about it and his personality. Is there any element that you're hearing around NFL circles that maybe the guy with a little bit more magic dust in his pocket is now no longer here?
Yeah, well, that's one of those things. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just not.
Right, unless you're going to make him your next head coach, there's no way to keep him.
Even if you are. What if Jed York had come to him and say, hey, listen, I'm going to pay you $7 million a year to stay as coordinator with the guarantee that you'll get the job when Kyle leaves. Well, first of all, I'd never have done that if I were Mike McDaniel, because how do I know? Kyle Shanahan's a young man. He's going to coach for 20 years. So it's just one of those things. There's nothing you can do about it. So even though there's nothing you can do about it, your question is an interesting one. Is the loss of Mike McDaniel something that none of us is talking about as much as probably we should? And I guess I would make this point about it. I'm not sure that Mike McDaniel, and again, I think, honestly, I think Mike McDaniel was probably more of a Debo whisperer than a quarterback whisperer. And by that I mean I wrote about it. You guys, I'm sure, have talked about it a lot.
By the way, if I were Mike, that's certainly what I would tell everyone.
Yeah. And look, Deebo Samuel basically showed up in Mike McDaniel's office every Tuesday, maybe late morning or whatever, and he would sit on the couch at McDaniel's office, and McDaniel, at some point, he would talk about the role he saw for Deebo that week so that Deebo could mentally start to think about it, which is interesting. But I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo would necessarily sit on his couch and say, hey, here's what I want to do. Because, listen, guys, I'm in Brooklyn, New York. I don't cover the 49ers every day. I'm not on the phone with Shanahan or Lynch. So I don't know what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo and Mike McDaniel during the season last year. And the only reason I raise that point is that I do know that I think Mike McDaniel was hugely instrumental in changing the direction of Deebo Samuel's career. I don't necessarily think that he was as important as, say, Kyle Shanahan was in working with the quarterback. Now, again, I don't know that, but my gut feeling is that Kyle Shanahan probably had as much to do as anybody with the play of Jimmy Garoppolo last year during the season. So I understand the thought about, missing Mike McDaniel and all that, and it's a valid thought. But I'm just not sure it's real.
Straighten us out about the Rams, because they seem to have been at least a mildly erratic team so far. Is this just normal for a Super Bowl champion to sort of struggle a bit to find their feet, or are there structural issues that are just now revealing themselves?
I think there's two major problems with the Rams right now. And look, they, honestly, they struggled to beat Atlanta at home. And then last week, they beat Arizona, and they were better than Arizona. I watched a lot of that game in the late window on Sunday. They were better than Arizona, but man, they were not very good on offense. So I'll tell you what I think, Ray. I think that all off season that Sean McVay really, really wanted his run game to be able to buttress in a more efficient way his passing game. And it's because he knew coming into this year that he wasn't going to have the 110% Matthew Stafford who could every week throw for 340 and 3 touchdowns and win. He wanted to be sure that with his elbow issue that he didn't put all of the pressure on Stafford coming into this game. So what have we seen in the first 3 weeks? We have seen an absolutely mediocre, and that's putting it kindly, running game that is only averaging 3.4 yards a carry. And we've also seen a passing game that is okay. And that's all I'd call it, okay. In the weirdest kind of coincidental thing, I was looking at this after the games on Sunday. So the Rams have a passer rating of 86.3 through 3 weeks. Opponents have a passer rating of 89.3. And neither of those is great, but the fact is that the opponent's passer rating is slightly better than Matthew Stafford. And I think the other one issue is, I don't know that the Rams would say this, but they have got to be exceedingly disappointed in Allen Robinson so far.
Yep.
Okay, he dropped a touchdown pass last week. He's had 3 drops so far in 3 games, and he's only caught 7 balls. And I can tell you, after having been in their training camp this year, they wanted Allen Robinson to be 1B to Cooper Kupp's 1A. And after 3 games, it's Cooper Kupp 28 catches, Allen Robinson 7. That is not 1B to 1A. That is 1A to 4C. So those are a few of the things. And I think one other thing I would say about their team is that it is totally unrealistic to expect that a Super Bowl champion with a bunch of veteran players is going to come back and play great right off the bat. It's totally unrealistic. And I think, I think there is a method to their madness about their plan for this year. They really want to make sure that they sign Odell Beckham Jr., probably in about a month. And I think Odell Beckham Jr. is more likely to go to the team that he thinks has the best chance to win a Super Bowl about a month from now. So I hate to say it, it sounds weird, but that makes all these games pretty important for Odell Beckham Jr. All things created equal, he'd love to go back to the Rams. But I'm just not sure that they're going to be the team in a month that is the team that gives him the best chance to win another ring.
Big game coming up in Santa Clara on Monday night. Lots of consequences feel like they ride on the Monday night game between the 49ers and Rams. Peter King, let's wrap up with this. There's one winless team in football, and the Raiders came into the year with a lot of expectations.
Yeah.
We know that Mark Davis has already had a visit with Josh McDaniels. Is there something rotten in Denmark?
Well, it isn't like Mark Davis can really do anything about this now. He's not exactly cash rich. A lot of people who have worked there have said that this is not a team, as well as they've done in Vegas so far, that has the ability, and the reason I talk about cash rich, they don't have the ability right now to swallow a $25 million. I have no idea what McDaniel's contract is, but they cannot pay off a guy who, who essentially is owed a lot of money. So, but having said all that, I think the biggest problem right now is that Derek Carr was handed the keys to an incredible offense, and yeah, he's got one injury with the concussion to Hunter Renfrow, who is an absolutely crucial piece to the puzzle. But Derek Carr has not played as well as he should have, and I'm not inside the building. I don't know how much that is due to whatever shortcomings that Josh McDaniels has, but Derek Carr has the ability to be a top 5 NFL quarterback. I don't care what people laugh when I say that, but Josh McDaniels made beautiful music with Tom Brady for over a decade, and they had an incredible relationship. And Tom Brady said, "Hey, dude, just tell me what to run. I'll run it." And so now you're looking at Derek Carr, who's got Devontae Adams, he's got Darren Waller, he's got Mac Hollins, who's been a revelation as the third receiver. He's got a good number 2 tight end in Foster Moreau. And my feeling looking at this team, even though Renfrow is iffy going forward right now, at least immediately, this is Derek Carr's time, and he's got to play better. And so to me, when I look at this team, this is, of all the teams with a must-win in the NFL this week, it is Denver at the Raiders, and the Raiders have to win this game on Sunday.
They got the Chiefs the following week if they don't. So 0-4 could turn into 0-5 really easily. Peter, you mentioned earlier that Bill Parcells was smoking a cigarette. Is that the last cigarette you saw in an NFL locker room? Who was smoking the last cigarette you've seen in an NFL locker room?
What a question. I don't recall.
Notice he didn't say great question. He just said, what a question.
No, I think it's a very interesting question. I don't recall. Listen, I don't think I have ever been in an NFL locker room, and this goes back to Cincinnati in 1984. Like, you know, that great picture when Lenny Dawson died?
Yeah.
Lenny Dawson with a cigarette in his hand at halftime of the Super Bowl, drinking a Fresca. One of the great photos in NFL history, and that is not an exaggeration. But I got to tell you, I think I missed the cigarette era mostly because I just don't remember, and this goes back 38 years now. I started covering the NFL in 1984, Cincinnati Bengals, and I do not remember smelling cigarette smoke working the Bengals locker room in 1984. Sam White, I know, didn't smoke. He was the head coach of that team. But I just don't remember that. But I do think I remember fondly, really, of Parcells because now everything seems to be you're in a rush. You know, okay, you've got 12 minutes with the coach today. Here we go. You guys fire away at the coach. And I just remember there were so many times where Parcells would put his feet up and sit there for a half hour, 40 minutes, and just say, okay, fellas, what do you got? And I hate to say it because I'm not one to say those were the days, but friggin' those were the days. I just love those days because it wasn't like everything a press conference. It was so often, like, you know, my favorite time on my training camp trip was this year when I was in Indianapolis on an off day, and Frank Reich said, let's go to lunch. And we went to a Ruth's Chris near their training camp, and we spent 2 hours just shooting the breeze, and I bet I took 3 notes the whole time because it was mostly about, hey, tell me about your team and give me some information. And that really is how the business has changed.
Yeah, conversations, not interviews.
Yes, exactly.
Great to talk to you. Thank you for this conversation, as always, Peter. Go smoke them if you got them.
All the best, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very, very much.